Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. We've been talking a lot about the trade deadline, but what are the biggest non-trade deadline storylines that exist for the Phillies as they're about to get their second half started?
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for over 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 4 seasons, and this is now my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure that you're rating and reviewing if you're checking us out in podcast form. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch us on YouTube, you can do that as well. The podcast is on YouTube. You can hit that subscribe button too when you do that. All of this is free and easy, and it really helps us out. It also helps you out. It gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. So I appreciate everyone who's rated, reviewed, subscribed, liked, commented, all of that great stuff. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Go ahead and check out our friends over at Game Time. So we're going to look at a couple of very interesting things. At least they're interesting to me. I hope they're interesting to you in today's episode. We're going to preview the Phil's matchup with the Los Angeles Angels. They start a 3-game series. Their first series back from the All-Star break starts tonight, right? They get rolling. So it's good to have baseball back. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to get into strength of schedule remaining and who's got the easiest path. The Phillies or other teams in their division, other teams in their league, other teams in baseball. Like, who do you look at as far as teams to keep an eye on based on strength of schedule alone? But where I wanted to start, every single conversation with the Phillies right now starts and ends with the July 31st trade deadline. That's all anybody's talking about. What will Dave Dombrowski do? How aggressive will he be? How much will the team improve? All of this stuff. Well, we covered the trade deadline. I want to talk to you a little bit about the big storylines facing the Phillies as they get ready to start their second half of their season that have nothing to do with the trade deadline or very, very little to do with the trade deadline, right? The non-trade ones that have gotten buried a little bit in this rumor mill of who's available and who's on the table. So we're going to break it down to big 3 for the Philadelphia Phillies. And the first one is going to be Bryce Harper. This is number 1 easily for the Fightin' Phils still. We have talked about Bryce a good amount, but he's shown flashes in the pre-All-Star break schedule that he was turning back into himself. We don't know if that's going to be something sustainable over the remainder of the season. So if there was a guy to raise the level of this Phillies lineup already on the team, it's Bryce Harper. He's the guy with the most upside on top of what he's already contributed. Now, will he be able to do that? How healthy is he? How much does he feel better with this time off for the All-Star break? And will he be able to manage that for the rest of the year? This is a major, major storyline. We've talked about it a bunch. But if you don't think the most important position player on this team to watch for the next 2.5 months is Bryce Harper, if you don't think that, you're crazy. He is. Easily. I know Kyle Schwarber's been good. Trey Turner's been good. Nick Castellanos has been solid, like all of this stuff. But no, it's the Bryce Harper show. And him managing his wrist injury is the number 1 non-trade deadline story facing this team. Number 2, we're going to go with a little bit of the starting rotation. Where in the world is Aaron Nola? It's about time that we figure out where Nola is. And with Taijuan Walker scheduled to throw as part of this rotation, even post-All-Star break, that's no Mick Abel. That's no Andrew Painter, and Aaron Nola has not been heard from. It feels like it's gone on long enough before we get an update on what exactly is going to happen with Aaron Nola and what their plans are. I don't think it's going to be a completely lost year for him. That means, to me, Nola is going to throw again in the starting rotation for this team. But when? And how effective will he be? Previously, I've kind of been in the camp of like, what do we care, right? Wheeler's dicing, Sanchez dicing, Suarez dicing. Luzardo's been good more than he's been bad. You figure out the 5th spot in the rotation, you roll on, you win plenty of games. Great, right? That's nice and easy. for the Philadelphia Phillies to wrap their minds around. But now that we're post All-Star break, the trade deadline bearing down on you, we're getting into a more dire part of the season where you start to have to truly evaluate what you have. And the guys that are really going to step up for this team in big moments start to reveal themselves this time of year, mid-July to August to September, so that when you hit October, you've got a great idea of what you have in stock. Well, Nola needs to kind of appear somewhere, whether it's he's not going to get it done this year, write him off, or he's back and he's dominating, or something in between. I'd just like to have more information on Aaron Nola. We're at a point now where I can turn my attention and say, it's gone on long enough that we ignore the Nola thing. Where the hell is this guy? And that's where I'm at with the Nola thing. So that's a big-time storyline that I'm going to be watching. And the number 3 storyline, now those aren't in any specific particular order. None of these are, but they're the big 3 in whatever order you want to put them in. Non-trade deadline, of course, deadline's the number 1. This one is going to be something that you look at for the future, but also for this year. How do the guys in contract years affect their valuation over the next couple months? Because guys like Ranger Suarez and Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto, Realmuto's turned it on lately. Schwarber's been rolling all year. Ranger's been rolling all year. But these are guys that clearly are sniffing a payday, right, of some sort. It's different for each of these guys. Ranger, it's his first big one. Schwarber, it may be his last big one. JT Realmuto, he may not get a big one. But for all of those different potential payment plans, they are putting together seasons that every time they have a successful game, successful start, successful week, you start to wonder how much they're going to cost. This is going to be the stretch where teams are evaluating, hey, can we sign these guys in the offseason? Maybe we don't make this move at the trade deadline because we think Schwarber's going to be available to sign. JT's going to be available to sign. Ranger's going to be available to sign. Teams are already starting to look at this. This is where you evaluate how much are they worth? How much are we willing to spend? You get that work done in this season, right? This is not just off-season stuff. And then the off-season, like the market sets itself. But you already have your idea before these guys get to free agency. What about they're going to command? And that's going to be based on the seasons of those 3 players as they continue. Now, why this is a big storyline for the Phillies now is those players know it as well. And every time they go out there and add dollar value to their name, they're doing it by helping the Philadelphia Phillies win ball games this year. So are those 3 guys that are going to really, really step up as, and not that they haven't already. Ranger's been awesome. Schwarber's been awesome. JT's gotten much better, even though he's been rough for most of this year. Like, when you look at what they could be, knowing that this is their stretch to earn the most amount of money, this in the postseason, because the postseason will still be a part of that conversation. I'm watching those 3 guys. How realistic is it that they can come back? How realistic is it the teams are going to throw the bag at them? And how much does it help raise this ceiling of the Phillies team right now? Are there any major storylines outside of the trade deadline that I missed? You can let me know in the comments, because there are a bunch of other things going on. The bullpen, the return of Jose Alvarado, right? How is he going to be handled when he gets back in August? Will he be a part of this team? It's a big part of it. The Andrew Painter call-up conversation, the Justin Crawford call-up conversation. Now, those I left out because they feel trade deadline dependent. Those guys could move, right? I know they say, Dave Dombrowski, Phillies reporters, all of this, they say Painter's untouchable, Crawford's close to untouchable. We'll see, right? I take that with a grain of salt. I always do, because of what we've seen in the past for teams that say, hey, this is an untouchable prospect, and the guy they didn't believe was available becomes available. And the next thing you know, you go back on your word. So you never know. Things change all the time. Things are fluid, but those are the other storylines considered. But I'm going with the contract year guys and how they wrap up what has been a strong year for 2 of the 3 of them. Aaron Nola, where in the world is he? Bryce Harper, how in the world is he? Those are the 3 biggest storylines of the second half that will determine whether or not this team is ready to compete for a World Series, or if they're just ready to compete in the division and maybe for the division and get knocked out early, right? That will be something that I'll be focusing on, and Phillies fans should be focusing on as well for the next 2.5 months outside of the trade deadline, so we can figure out what this team is going to be. again, just in case you're not grasping. Like, the trade deadline is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 on the true list, right? But when I take out the trade deadline, these are the other options that should be focuses, because there's not going to be a trade tomorrow, right? There's not going to be a trade Monday. There's going to be movement when we get closer to July 31st. We still got about 2 weeks, a little under 2 weeks to go until that point. Coming up next, strength of schedule is always something very intriguing to me, because the easier teams you play, the better record you have. The better record you have, the better chance you have to seed out well, and the better chance you have to seed out well, the better chance you have to make a postseason run. It's simple. You play worse teams, you're a better team. Or at least your record will say you're a better team. So where do the Phillies rank in strength of schedule compared to their peers around baseball, their peers in the National League, and their peers in division? There's one team they got to keep an eye on. But other than that, they might have some smooth sailing. We'll talk about it as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk game time, though, because we've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you could save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Maybe you're tired of that endless scrolling where it's like, nope, that ticket's not good, that seat's not good, that price is not good. No. Game Time zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you, so they help you find the best deal. And if you've wondered what your view is going to be, well, the app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. And with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. There are no hidden fees. And if your plans change, right, they happen. Let's say I can't make it to the game anymore. Anything weird happens with that. The Game Time guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed with our friends over at Game Time. Let's talk about strength of schedule now. This is always something that I like to, the big milestones of a Major League Baseball season or an NFL, NBA, or NHL season. I like to take a peek at it. Who's got the easiest stretch? So thank you to our friends, as always, over at Tankathon for putting this together. Where are the Phillies? Let's start with that first and foremost. The Philadelphia Phillies are right about in the middle of Major League Baseball. They have the 17th toughest strength of schedule remaining, an average win percentage of .496. So the teams they're playing average out to below 500, which is why they average out to the easier side of the middle. So 15 right in the middle, 16 is on the easier side, 14 is on the harder side. So the team listed at 1 on here would have the hardest schedule remaining, and that would be our pals up in Cincinnati. The Reds have the toughest strength of schedule. The easiest strength of schedule, Cleveland Guardians. So neither of those at the polls are all that interesting to the Phillies from our perspective. And the Phillies being right in the middle, you might say, well, why in the world are we looking at this? Okay, so their schedule's not too hard, not too easy. Neither of the teams that have the easiest or hardest schedule are important to the Phillies. Well, we look at who's where and the teams that the Phillies have to keep an eye on. The number one team that the Philadelphia Phillies should be worried about right now is the Chicago Cubs, because the Cubs have the third easiest remaining schedule in baseball. And they've also been darn good this year, right? They're in position to take control of the second spot in the National League behind the Dodgers. The Dodgers actually have the sixth easiest schedule in baseball. There's a lot of teams down here that are really good baseball teams that have the easiest schedules. Let's just start with Cleveland at 30. They're out of it, but they have an easy schedule, or they seem to be out of it. The Astros, great team, second easiest schedule. Cubs, great team, third easiest schedule. Padres, great team, fourth easiest schedule. Tigers, best team in baseball, fifth easiest schedule. Dodgers, second best team in baseball, sixth easiest schedule. I mean, you don't get to a bad team really until you get to the Twins again. And it's funny, the Twins and the Guardians there in the AL Central could both be sellers that the Phillies are interested in. But so teams like the Dodgers and Cubs and Padres, who are on the National League side, are the ones to keep an eye on. But I think the Cubs are the best balance of team you should finish ahead of, team that has an easy stretch, and team that has played pretty darn good baseball, right? So they're good enough that they can end up ahead of you in the standings. They're bad enough that you should still be able to beat them, but the schedule is also bad enough that that might flip-flop the expectations there. That's why I highlight that team. Now let's look in division a little bit, because the team that you're worried about most in the division is the Mets. They're only a half game back of you. Well, they have the 7th toughest schedule in baseball remaining. Yeah, the Phils are 17th. The Mets are 7th, an average win percentage of .511. And they've got some tough games still to go. 3 against Detroit, 3 against the Cubs, 3 against the Brewers, 7 against the Fighting Phils, 6 against the Padres, 6 against the Giants. Yeah, they've got work to be done up there in New York. So they have a tough part of their schedule remaining. The Phillies have an easier part of their schedule remaining. So that plays into your chances to take advantage there. Now, who are the teams that could maybe come out of nowhere? Are there any teams in the division? Well, the Braves have the 9th hardest schedule, tougher schedule than the Phillies, and they're already way back. The Nationals and Marlins, 13th and 14th, respectively. Well, flip that. Nationals 14, Marlins 13. So neither of those teams have like this easy stretch where they're making a run at anything. The Phillies should win the division. They should win the NL East. And their strength of schedule points to them having the best chance to do so of the National League East teams. Now, the other thing that I want to look at, just in the immediacy, are the teams that have potential seller bias towards the deadline. So they're leaning towards offloading players at the major league level, but also have a tough schedule that'll push them even further. So that's why the Guardians are a prime trade candidate for the Philadelphia Phillies. Hardest schedule in baseball, haven't had a great record. Detroit's running away with the division. The Twins, one of the hardest schedules remaining, not a great baseball team, in trouble in the AL Central with Detroit running away with it. Yohan Duran, Byron Buxton, Emmanuel Clase, Stephen Kwan. These are the names that you think about when you look at those two teams. The Pittsburgh Pirates, David Bednar's been a name that's popped up a bunch. They are right behind the Twins as far as strength of schedule, one of the tougher schedules in baseball. So those are the 3 teams that I would look at as ones that you really would expect to be sellers. The Orioles are another team, and coming out tomorrow, I did a crossover with Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles, and we talked about that. But they have the 4th hardest schedule. Oh, I was actually going backwards. Sorry, easiest schedule. So the Twins, Pirates, and Guardians you're looking at rather as teams that could hurt their seller status. Scratch all of that and reverse it. I was reading things backwards. Sorry, it has been a long week. So does that make you worry then about the chances that those teams sell? It shouldn't, but maybe a team like the Pirates convinces themselves, hey, we can make a run at this, even though the Cubs and Brewers are running off. And the Twins and the Guardians, maybe they think they can make a late wild card push, even though the Tigers are running away with their division. The Orioles may be a team that actually looks more attractive then as a trade partner, being that they have the 4th hardest schedule in all of baseball. And that is a team that we talk about at length between me and Connor Newcomb and the various players that they could have available. That episode will be out tomorrow. The one other thing that I want to look at on here is that the Milwaukee Brewers, who made a miracle run at the back end of the first half of the schedule, they have the 5th hardest schedule remaining in all of baseball. So that's a team that may look like right now when you look at the standings, hey, they've got momentum. They're rolling. Could they unseed the Phillies? Could the Phillies be in a situation where they are the 3 seed and then they have to play a wild card game against Milwaukee, and maybe that leads to a really, really tough matchup there because the Cubs and the Dodgers take priority as division winners. I don't know how that's all going to work out as far as seeding. What I do know is the Brewers do not have as easy of a path as it looks to true contention for one of the top seeds in the National League, if you believe that their strength of schedule is a big indicator of that. So just a couple of insights on what is remaining here in baseball for the Phillies and for other teams. The NL East, I mean, the Phillies have the easiest schedule, so they should win the division. The National League, The Phillies have a middle of the pack schedule, just like they do for regular baseball. So nothing too crazy to keep an eye on. Pretty balanced schedule for the Titans, but something that does point them in the right direction. Coming up next, part of the easy schedule, playing teams like the Angels. The Angels at 47 and 49, 2 games below 500, are not exactly world beaters. And you should have the pitching matchup in every single one of these games. You'd imagine, because nobody's announced yet for the Angels. What in the world's going on with that? And how did the Phillies find their way to build momentum out of the All-Star break? We will talk about that coming up as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. There are a couple of reasons that you should be zoned in on the Phillies matchup with the Los Angeles Angels, a 3-game series starting tonight at Citizens Bank Park. Reason one, it's a home series, so you don't have to stay up late like we did with the West Coast trip right before the All-Star break. Reason two, well, you missed baseball for like a week. So it's nice to have the Titans back, and I'm going to be excited to watch Jesus Luzardo take the mound against the Angels tonight at 6:45. Reason three, you should be able to beat this team. You are much better than they are in pretty much every aspect of the game. And reason four, the Angels could be sellers at the deadline. And there is an intriguing name in Taylor Ward that you may want to look at as a right-handed outfield bat. Plays left field for the Angels. Just look at some of the numbers for the Angels for who's leading the team. Ward has 21 homers to lead the team. He has 65 RBIs to lead the team. Just to compare that, Schwarber's got 69 RBIs for the Phillies, so only 4 more than Ward. 9 more home runs, but Schwarber is a home run guy. Ward is only batting .224, but man, has he shown off some pop. He's a guy that I would love on this team. Will the Angels sell? You can help them if you go out there and beat the brakes off of them in Philadelphia. So now you're starting to look at some of the teams you could play and say, how can the way we play them affect how they are at the trade deadline? Zach Neto is leading the Angels in average at .279. So there are other guys on this team. And another name that you always have to be aware of when you face the Los Angeles Angels is that Mike Trout guy. So we will see what the Angels have in store. But they are just they're not really that great of a baseball team when it comes to the numbers that they're putting up. Just looking at some of the stats for them. As far as batting average is concerned, they've only got 4 guys hitting above 240, but 2 of those guys are hitting 241 and 243. Zach Neto's batting .279. Noah Schanuel is batting .275. And then you've got Joe Adell batting .243. You've got Travis d'Arnaud batting .241. No one else is over .240. Like, they just don't really have great, consistent hitters. They've got 2 guys, basically, that have been hitting well for average. You know, Trout's always going to be a problem. He's walked 48 times despite hitting .238. So that just shows you there's still respect for Mike Trout. But outside of him, Logan O'Hoppe, Taylor Ward, and Joe Adell, they only have 1 other guy who's in double digits 2 other guys who are in double digits for home runs. Neto at 15 and Jorge Soler at 10. But you're not really looking at either of those guys as major power options. It's just not that quality of a baseball team there out in Los Angeles. And that's the offense. That's the good part of their team. Clearly, the part that they're not sold on is their pitching. They don't have listed pitchers for this series yet. I'm recording this right now. It is 11:46. We are just about 6 hours or 7 hours from first pitch of game 1, and there is still no listed starter for any game in the series for the Angels. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do there as far as that's concerned, but they don't really have a lot of guys to turn to. I mean, you could throw Jose Soriano, who's got a 3.9 ERA. You could throw Yusei Kikuchi, who's got a 3.11 ERA. Not bad. You could throw Tyler Anderson, who's got a 4.34 ERA. But none of these guys are like world beaters, and the Phillies are going to have the pitching advantage in pretty much every one of these games this series. The Phillies, how they set up their rotation, they go Luzardo game 1. They go Walker game 2, which would be, if you're going to lose a game, the one that you lose. But then Ranger throws on Sunday. So you should win at least games 1 and 3 of this series here in Philadelphia, and that would lead to momentum, right? Little quirky part of the schedule, the Phillies play 11, They don't play a National League team until the 11th of August. Angels, American League West. Red Sox, American League East. Head up to New York to face the Yankees, American League East. Then head to Chicago to face the White Sox in American League Central. Then you're going to come back home and play the Tigers at Citizens Bank Park, Monster Series, American League Central. Then you welcome the Orioles, American League East. Then you go to Texas to face the Rangers. And that rounds out before you play the Reds on August 11th, a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight American League series. Kind of a weird quirk of the schedule. Now, I will tell you right now, because there's only so much to say about the Angels, who have not been that great of a team. I told you kind of who to look out for. And we'll talk a little bit about what Phillies, I think, are in for big series coming off the All-Star break. But I think the American League is the easier league to play against, right? I think the better league is the National League. Tigers are really good. Outside of the Tigers, who are the teams that you're really worried about in the American League as far as true World Series contenders? I guess the Yankees have to be in there because they went last year. And then who? Am I missing somebody that's really, really good? I guess the Blue Jays have been on a heater lately. But I don't know. The National League has the Cubs, the Phillies, the Dodgers. The Brewers have gone on a run now. The Mets. Like, there are a lot. The Padres you can throw in there. Maybe the Giants. Like, there are a lot of teams in the National League that you could look at as contenders. In the American League, it feels like a couple-team race. So the fact that you're playing these series against American League teams might lend to an easier path through the first part of the post-All-Star break schedule, which leads us to who benefits the most from the rest from the All-Star break that could have a big series against the Angels. Well, automatically, you got to think Kyle Schwarber. After the swing-off performance in the All-Star game that turned into the Home Run Derby Part 2, is that momentum for Kyle Schwarber. He's going to be honored tomorrow's game, Saturday's game, for his accomplishments as All-Star Game MVP. So that'll be cool to see if you're heading down to the yard. That will be an interesting guy to watch in this series. Can he build momentum off of 3 swings off batting practice? Don't go too far. Is this the time of year where Kyle Schwarber's normally still swinging it pretty well? Yeah, it is. So he's the number one guy that I'm going to be watching outside the Bryce Harper situation that we mentioned earlier on in the episode with injury. I think as far as mental reset guys, Max Kepler is a tricky guy to evaluate. Will he be abysmal again? Will he start to, after this break, pay off with the rest that he got? Like, he gets a chance to get away from it all, sit down, contemplate, hey, in 2 weeks, I might not be on this team anymore if I don't figure something out quick. I have not played up to my standard. How do I mentally reset going into the All-Star break? For some guys, it can be a chance for them to turn their brain off, turn it back on again, and maybe it's just like rebooting a computer system. So I don't know. I'll be watching Kepler to see if the break did him any good. Outside of him, though, and Schwarber with the momentum, I don't know. I don't really have major expectations for these guys to look any different than they did heading into the break. Maybe they'll get hot, maybe they'll get cold, but I don't think that'll have anything to do with we had 4 or 5 days off. I think that's just the natural flows of baseball outside of those 2 guys, because Kepler's been struggling, and he's clearly been mentally going through it a little bit, arguing about playing time and stuff. And Schwarber just had he was the only participating All-Star, so he's the only one you can look at as a momentum builder. I don't know. We'll see, man. It's just great to have baseball back. I don't know about you guys, but I got really, really bored last night. I was just sitting on the couch. I'd done recording a couple episodes, and I was just like, okay, I really wish the Phillies are playing right now. It's funny how even when they annoy you so much day in and day out, you miss them when they go away for like 4 or 5 days. It really makes you think about how destitute the summer sports scene would be if we did not have a good baseball team. Maybe this was a week where you think about stuff that you've taken for granted. Maybe it's a week where you say, wow, not having a baseball team I want to sit down and watch or can sit down and watch. Is this what it feels like to be a White Sox fan, a Rockies fan, maybe a Nationals fan right now? Like, we're lucky that we get to now tune in tonight and watch a competitive baseball team try and make another run at World Series contention. And it's time for them to ramp up even further. So I'll be watching. You'll be watching. We'll be breaking down more on Monday's episode of Locked On Phillies. And a reminder, a crossover with Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles, Connor Squared, comes out tomorrow on trade deadline previews. We're going to be doing that with a couple teams that could be sellers as we get closer to July 31st. So a lot of great content still to come, but that's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. Once again, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I will talk to you tomorrow, even though the episodes are recorded, on our next episode. The next new episode, I will talk to you on Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Go Phils. See you then.